Chapter 8: Chronic Stress and Cognitive Load. This is one of the strongest and most consistent findings in psychology and neuroscience. Chronic stress doesn't simply affect mood, it can influence attention, memory, decision-making, sleep, emotional regulation, and physical health. The key idea is that the human brain evolved to handle short bursts of stress, not years of continuous stress. It's important to note that chronic stress can arise from many sources: persistent poverty, caregiving, unsafe neighborhoods, chronic illness, unstable employment, discrimination, war, or prolonged uncertainty. The underlying psychological processes are broadly similar regardless of the source. A simplified way to think about the brain is that it has two broad modes. Mode 1, growth. When life feels relatively safe, the brain can focus on learning, creativity, planning, curiosity, long-term goals, building relationships. And this is when people are most able to think strategically. Mode 2, survival. When the brain detects ongoing danger, its priorities change. Instead of asking, how do I build a better future? It asks, how do I get through today? That shift is adaptive in the short term. If your home is on fire, you shouldn't be thinking about your 5-year career plan. The problem comes when the brain never feels able to leave survival mode. When we perceive a threat, the body releases stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. In the short term, they are useful. They help us react faster, notice danger, mobilize energy, and remember emotionally significant events. However, if these systems remain activated for months or years, they can begin to interfere with functions that support learning, planning, and emotional regulation. Research has linked prolonged stress with difficulties in concentrating, holding information in working memory, controlling impulses, sleeping well, and recovering emotionally after setbacks. These effects vary widely between individuals and are influenced by protective factors such as supportive relationships, exercise, sleep, and access to care. Cognitive load, the overloaded desk. Imagine your mind as a desk. A few papers are spread across it. There's plenty of room to work. Now imagine adding overdue rent, debt, an ill parent, fear of losing your job, neighborhood violence, discrimination at work, childcare concerns, lack of sleep. Eventually, the desk becomes so cluttered that there's hardly any space left to work on anything else. The brain hasn't become less intelligent, it has become overloaded. Psychologists call this cognitive load. When mental resources are consumed by ongoing stresses, fewer remain available for solving new problems. People under chronic stress often ask, what's wrong with me? I never used to forget things. In many cases, nothing is fundamentally wrong. Their working memory is already occupied. Imagine trying to remember a phone number while someone is shouting questions at you. Your memory hasn't disappeared. It's competing with other demands. Emotional regulation becomes harder. Stress also affects patience. Suppose someone is carrying almost no psychological burden. A minor inconvenience, a slow checkout line, or a rude comment may be brushed off. Now imagine someone already overwhelmed by weeks of financial uncertainty, poor sleep, and caregiving responsibilities. That same inconvenience may trigger a much stronger emotional reaction. The event hasn't changed, their remaining emotional capacity has. People living in environments where they frequently anticipate danger often devote considerable mental energy to monitoring their surroundings. They may be constantly asking, who's behind me? Is this street safe? Will I lose my job? Will this bill bounce? What if something unexpected happens? This vigilance can be protective, but it is also tiring. Attention devoted to scanning for threats is attention that cannot simultaneously be devoted to creativity, learning, or long-term planning. Complex decisions require mental bandwidth. Choosing between 2 retirement funds, planning a business, studying for an exam, negotiating a contract, all require sustained concentration. When the brain is exhausted, people are more likely to postpone difficult decisions, rely on familiar habits, choose simpler solutions, or avoid decisions altogether. These are common responses to mental overload, not necessarily signs of poor judgment. Imagine a fictional woman named Danielle, age 34. Danielle is a single mother of two. She works full-time in a warehouse. Every month feels uncertain. Her landlord has hinted that rent may increase. Her youngest child has asthma. Her car is unreliable. Her mother recently became ill. None of these problems is catastrophic on its own. Together, they rarely leave her mind. Danielle wakes at 5:30 a.m. Before getting out of bed, her mind has already cycled through the electricity bill, whether her son has enough medication, how much petrol is left, whether she'll be asked to work overtime, and whether she can afford groceries before payday. She hasn't even left the house. Her brain has already been working for an hour. Her supervisor explains a new inventory system. Danielle struggles to follow the instructions. She makes several mistakes. A co-worker quietly says, "You've seemed distracted lately." Danielle feels embarrassed. She used to learn quickly. What she doesn't realize is that much of her mental bandwidth is already committed to managing ongoing stress. Her daughter asks for help with homework. Danielle wants to help. Instead, she finds herself staring blankly at the page. She's mentally exhausted, not because she doesn't care, because her cognitive resources are depleted. Later that night, she forgets to pay an important bill she had intended to handle. She feels guilty, but forgetting is often a symptom of overload rather than indifference. Months later, Danielle receives a modest promotion with more predictable hours and a small pay increase. Around the same time, her children began receiving after-school support, reducing some childcare pressure. Within a year, something surprising happens. She starts reading again. She enrolls in an evening course. She remembers appointments more easily. She laughs more often. Friends comment, "You seem like your old self." Danielle replies, "I didn't become a different person. I finally stopped feeling like I was drowning every day." What changed wasn't her intelligence. It was the amount of mental space available for thinking beyond survival. One useful concept from psychology is allostatic load, the cumulative wear and tear on the body and brain from repeated or chronic stress. When the stress response is activated too often without sufficient recovery, it can gradually affect physical health, mood, attention, and cognition. The encouraging aspect is that many of these effects are at least partly reversible. When chronic stress decreases through greater financial stability, safer environments, supportive relationships, better sleep, effective therapy, or access to healthcare, people often regain mental clarity, emotional resilience, and planning capacity. In many cases, the abilities were never lost. They were temporarily obscured by the demands of persistent stress. The broader lesson is that chronic stress changes what the brain prioritizes. It shifts attention toward immediate survival, consumes cognitive resources, and makes complex thinking more difficult. Understanding this helps explain why capable people may struggle under prolonged adversity, while also highlighting that when the burden is reduced, many can recover much of their cognitive and emotional functioning.